the disappearance of female pilot Amelia Earhart during her round-the-world air voyage back in 1937.
The devastating Amelia Earhart's disappearance remains a puzzle, filled with courage and hidden secrets. As she aimed to fly around the world, her boldness made her famous, but she vanished without a trace. With her navigator Fred Noonan, she flew into unknown areas where danger lurked. Their sudden disappearance is one of the biggest mysteries of our time. Join us as we delve into Amelia Earhart's final voyage, assembling clues and pursuing truths amidst the shadows of uncertainty. Amelia's first major leap across the Atlantic. A lot of people gave Amelia Earhart a special nickname, the Sky's Darling. She first saw the world on July 24, 1897, in a small, charming town known as Atchison, Kansas. Amelia wasn't just any ordinary person. She was a very famous pilot, both in the United States and globally. Everyone knew her name because of her incredible courage and skills in flying. Her most jaw-dropping feat was crossing the big, wide Atlantic Ocean all by herself in an airplane. Before she did this solo flight, she had crossed the ocean with other pilots. These are just a couple of examples of the many wonderful and exciting things she accomplished while she flew planes. Throughout her life, Amelia collected stories of adventure and success like treasures. However, as often happens with very famous people, her life was not without its challenges and mysteries. In July of 1937, Amelia set out on an extremely daring mission. She aimed to set a record as the first female pilot to fly around the entire globe. Sadly, on her second attempt at this massive challenge, a heartbreaking event occurred. She disappeared and left no clues behind. Now let's rewind the clock a bit to March 17, 1937. This was the day when Amelia first embarked on this ambitious journey to circle the planet. She wasn't alone. She had a team of two very important assistants. One of them was Fred Noonan, and the other was Harry Manning. Harry was not just an average crew member. He was an expert in using radio equipment, which was extremely crucial for navigating and communicating during the flight. Amelia Earhart and her crew set out with hearts full of dreams and eyes set on the horizon. They took their first big leap from Oakland, California, aiming to reach the warm and welcoming islands of Honolulu, Hawaii. The journey to Hawaii was a smooth sail, filled with excitement and the thrill of adventure. But this happiness was short-lived, as troubles began to brew as soon as they prepared for their next flight from Honolulu. On that fateful day, as they attempted to take to the skies once again, something went terribly wrong. Onlookers with bated breath could only speculate what happened. Some whispered it might have been Amelia's error. Others suggested a sudden tire burst led to the mishap. Regardless of the cause, their plane struggled to lift off and ended in a mishap that marked the runway with signs of distress. This incident wasn't just a minor bump, it was a major setback. It was so severe that it left deep concerns and doubts in their hearts. The aftermath of this failed attempt was significant. It didn't just damage the aircraft, it shook the confidence of the team. When the chance to circle the globe presented itself again 2 months later, Manning, shaken by the previous failure and the dangers they had narrowly escaped, chose to step away. His decision was driven by the fear of what had already gone wrong. He wasn't willing to gamble with fate a second time. Despite the shadows of doubt and the loss of one crew member, Amelia Earhart's spirit remained unbroken. She was determined more than ever to chase her dream. So, on May 21, 1937, with her trusted companion Fred Noonan by her side, Amelia boarded their robust Lockheed 10 Electra. This was no ordinary aircraft. It was a marvel designed for long distances, capable of carrying an impressive 1,000 pounds of fuel, a necessity for the monumental journey ahead. This time, their departure point was the same, Oakland, California, but their eyes were set on a new destination, the sunny landscapes of Miami, Florida. This part of their journey was filled with hope and careful optimism. They cruised above the clouds, over majestic lands and across vast oceans, making pit stops in diverse and exotic locations, such as the vibrant cultures of South America, the mysterious terrains of Africa, the bustling cities of India, and the rich landscapes of Southeast Asia. Each stop was an opportunity to refuel not just their plane, but also their spirits, preparing them for the next leg of their epic journey around the world. After an adventurous journey that had lasted about 6 weeks, Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan finally arrived at a location known as Leh, situated in New Guinea. By this point in their incredible journey, they had already traversed over 22,000 miles of the Earth's surface, leaving behind diverse landscapes, cultures, and challenges. They were now on the brink of completing their mission, with just 7,000 miles remaining. Although this distance might sound daunting to many, for Amelia and Fred, it represented the final leg of their monumental endeavor. They were on the edge of making history, and the anticipation was building. In Leh, they took the time to prepare for the next phase of their journey. They replenished their plane's fuel tanks, checked every piece of equipment, and reviewed their route. The mood was a blend of excitement and the weight of expectation. They knew the importance of what lay ahead and were determined to see it through. The morning of July 2nd dawned bright and clear, a seemingly perfect day for flying. With a sense of renewed determination and hope, Amelia and Fred boarded their trusty Lockheed 10 Electra, ready to take on the skies once again. The plan for this next segment was clear. They needed to embark on an 8-hour flight covering 2,556 miles to reach their next destination, a small speck in the vastness of the ocean known as Howland Island. This tiny island was to be their next pit stop, a crucial refueling point that would enable them to continue their journey. Despite the isolation and the small size of Howland Island, Amelia and Fred were prepared. They had a plan, and if everything went as expected, they would land safely, refuel, and be one significant step closer to completing their circumnavigation. The flight to Howland Island was not anticipated to be particularly perilous. The weather reports were favorable, and the sea stretched out below them, calm and seemingly welcoming. However, the vastness of the ocean and the small size of the island made precision and timing crucial. The island was like a needle in a haystack, and finding it required exact navigation. Despite the potential challenges, Amelia and Fred were seasoned adventurers. They had faced and overcome numerous obstacles throughout their journey. This part of the trip was supposed to be just another day at the office for them, although it was in the most extraordinary office one could imagine. Flying a plane over the immense Pacific Ocean. As we dig deeper into Amelia's story, the sky starts to fill with clouds of doubt and danger, making her path less clear and more frightening. Amelia's troubled takeoff. In Leh, a small and cozy town tucked away in New Guinea, there was a man by the name of Harry Belfour. This man held a very important job in the community. His main duty was to keep up the radio communication with two adventurers, Amelia Earhart and her navigator, Fred Noonan. They were embarking on a daring flight, and Harry's role was crucial. He was the lifeline, the one responsible for guiding them, ensuring they had clear directions and were aware of any important news or changes. Every hour, without fail, Harry had to check in with them, making sure they were safe and informed with the most recent updates. On a clear and bright morning, as Amelia and Fred began their thrilling expedition, Harry was ready and alert at his station. His task for the day was to send out 3 essential messages. The first one was particularly urgent. He had to let them know about the sudden, strong winds that were blowing directly on their path. These weren't just mild gusts. These were strong winds capable of throwing their flight plan off course. The winds could lead to the airplane using up fuel much quicker than anticipated, possibly causing delays. Given the length of their flight and the precise planning needed, sharing this information was critical. However, Harry faced a significant challenge. There seemed to be a disconnect with Amelia Earhart. He couldn't get through to her. Despite his relentless efforts, there was no acknowledgement of the urgent warnings he was sending out. It was a mystery whether Amelia and Fred were even aware of the vital information that could impact their journey significantly. The lack of response was deeply troubling for Harry. But then, something unexpected happened. At approximately 2:18 p.m., after hours of silence, there was a sudden breakthrough. The radio, which had been quiet, crackled to life, and Amelia's voice was finally heard by Harry Belfour. In her initial delayed transmission, Amelia's voice came through the radio with unexpected calmness and clarity. She shared that their journey was proceeding well, gliding through the skies at a brisk pace of 140 knots. Furthermore, she disclosed that they were cruising at a considerable height, positioned 7,000 feet above the Earth. There were no hints of worry or emergency in her tone. It appeared as if she was merely touching base, updating their status without any underlying concerns at that particular time. However, as the minutes turned into hours, the situation seemed to evolve. Roughly 60 minutes after her initial report, Amelia communicated again. But this message painted a slightly different picture. She revealed that they had climbed even higher than previously reported, now soaring at a remarkable 10,000 feet above sea level. This rise in altitude wasn't minor, it represented a significant leap upward. Such an increase was notable because it implied a greater consumption of their fuel supply. In the realm of long-distance flying, fuel management is of paramount importance. Consuming excess fuel for climbing could result in having reduced reserves for the remainder of their voyage, which could spell trouble under certain circumstances. The precise motives behind Amelia Earhart's decision to elevate her aircraft to such heights remain somewhat obscured by history. Nonetheless, during that flight, she remarked on the presence of extensive cloud cover. The sky was laden with dense, formidable clouds. It stands to reason that Amelia may have elected to ascend to a higher altitude in an attempt to navigate above this thick layer of clouds. Flying over them might provide a more direct route and more favorable flying conditions. Yet, this strategic choice also opened up room for speculation and various theories regarding the subsequent events of their journey. By choosing to fly higher, Amelia and Fred could have been trying to avoid turbulence or ensure better visibility and navigational ease. However, this adjustment also meant engaging with different air densities and temperatures, which could affect the aircraft's performance and fuel efficiency. The higher they went, the colder and thinner the air, which has direct implications on engine performance and fuel consumption. These elements are crucial in aerial navigation, especially when traversing vast, uncharted areas. The decisions made at high altitudes, amidst uncertain weather conditions, and with limited fuel, could lead to critical situations, influencing the fate of their historic flight. Firstly, it's believed that Amelia and her navigator, Fred Noonan, realized that the wind was much stronger and blowing more directly against them than they had initially thought. This stronger headwind could have been a problem, slowing them down and making their journey longer than expected. To deal with this, they might have had to adjust their flight path, trying to find a more favorable route where the wind would not slow them down as much. Secondly, there's speculation that they realized they were getting close to their destination, Howland Island, especially since they reported having only about 100 gallons of fuel left. This would not have been much, considering the distance they still had to cover and the potential for strong winds to increase fuel consumption. As the flight continued, Amelia began sending more radio messages. These messages were being picked up by the Coast Guard's ship, the Atchison, which was stationed near Howland Island, eagerly awaiting Amelia's arrival. The crew aboard the Atchison began to feel hopeful as the messages from Amelia's plane became clearer and stronger. This led them to believe that Amelia's plane was getting closer. At one exciting moment, the radio operator on the Atchison was so convinced that Amelia was nearby that he left his post and went outside, hoping to catch sight of her plane approaching. However, this is when things started to unravel dramatically. A severe issue arose. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan were unable to receive any of the Atchison's radio messages. In an attempt to solve this communication breakdown, they suggested that the Atchison should use Morse code to communicate, hoping this method would succeed where voice communications had failed. Unfortunately, this attempt was also unsuccessful. The two were struggling immensely to locate Howland Island, flying back and forth in an attempt to spot this tiny landmass in the vast ocean. In the middle of this tense search, a distressing message was received by the Atchison from Amelia. She reported, "Atchison, "We must be right above you but cannot see you. Our airplane's fuel is alarmingly low. We've attempted to reach you with our calls but can't seem to get through. We are flying at an altitude of just 1,000 feet." The story grows darker and more mysterious as Amelia's daring flight turns into a scary fight to stay in the air and find a safe place to land. The mystery of Earhart's last location. Everything started out as an amazing and smooth journey, but quickly turned into something very frightening and immediate. Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan realized that they didn't have much time left to find a safe spot to land. At the same time, the Coast Guard was having a hard time trying to figure out where Earhart's plane, the Electra, was, along with where she and Noonan could be. Then, something alarming happened at 8:43 in the morning. Earhart sent out what would become her last call for help. She said, "We are on the line 157-337. We will send this message again. We will also send it on 6210 kilocycles. Please wait." However, heartbreakingly, no more messages came after that. Amelia Earhart's aspiration to set a new world record swiftly transformed into a dire situation, prompting an extensive search effort. The operation commenced with the Coast Guard vessel, Atchison, which scoured the vast expanse of the Pacific Ocean situated northwest of Howland Island, where Earhart was supposed to land. This initial phase was just the tip of the iceberg in what would become a monumental search mission. As the search progressed, the situation grew increasingly critical. 5 days following the commencement of the search area expanded. The U.S. battleship Colorado joined the effort, focusing its resources southeast of Earhart's last confirmed location. The urgency and scope of the mission continued to escalate. Not long after Colorado joined the search, the USS Lexington departed from San Diego, amplifying the search operations with its arrival. These intensive efforts persisted unabated until July 18th, covering vast areas of ocean in a desperate bid to locate the missing aviators. The search was not confined to the sea. The U.S. Navy deployed aircraft to cover more ground, or rather, more sea. They expanded their search to include aerial reconnaissance, particularly over Gardner Island, a location not far from Earhart's last known whereabouts. As the Navy pilots swept over the island, they observed indications that suggested recent human activity. However, there was no conclusive evidence to link these findings to Earhart or her navigator Noonan. No wreckage of the plane was spotted, leaving the fate of the duo shrouded in mystery. Despite the combined efforts of the Coast Guard, the U.S. Navy, and various other entities, the enigma only deepened. The prevailing theory among many is rooted in a grim reality: fuel scarcity. This hypothesis gains traction, particularly in light of Earhart's distressing communication during one of her final transmissions to the Atchison, in which she reported nearing the end of her fuel reserves. This revelation is pivotal, as it provides tangible evidence of their desperate situation, transitioning from speculative to almost certain. The acknowledgement of their dwindling fuel supply underscores the severity of their predicament, offering a probable explanation for their mysterious disappearance. It paints a somber picture of the final moments of their flight, turning what was once a mission filled with hope and ambition into a poignant reminder of the risks inherent in pioneering exploration. Now, there are some who think the airplane had enough fuel to fly for 24 hours, not just 20 hours. But what really happened seems different from this idea. Why? Because Amelia herself said they were low on fuel. That's a big clue about what happened. Also, there are some smart people at the Jet Propulsion Center, which is a part of a big school called Caltech, who have studied what happened. They think the airplane used up all its fuel and disappeared. They believe this because there were strong winds blowing against the airplane, making it harder to fly. And because of these strong winds, Amelia had to fly higher than she had planned. Flying higher and fighting against the wind means the airplane would use more fuel. So it seems pretty clear that Amelia Earhart and her co-pilot, Fred Noonan, kept flying until there was no fuel left. This is really sad because it probably means their airplane fell from the sky into the huge, deep Pacific Ocean. This would lead to a very sad ending. with them losing their lives and the airplane sinking deep into the ocean, about 18,000 feet below the surface. In the world of guesses and possibilities, we venture into different theories about what might have happened to Amelia, imagining other endings to her journey. Possible survival on an uninhabited island, but a big puzzle remains, puzzling many. Why, if Amelia Earhart and her flying partner, Fred Noonan, knew they were about to run out of gas, didn't they try to land somewhere safe before they were totally out of fuel? Here begins the twist in the tale, giving us another angle to think about. Some people believe Earhart and Noonan did try to land in an emergency. Later, when pilots from the American Navy flew over an island called Gardner Island, now called Nikumaroro, located roughly 350 nautical miles south of their intended destination, Howland Island, and directly in the flight path Earhart said they'd be on, they found something unexpected. They discovered a detail they didn't expect. The island had no people living on it for many years. However, during their flyover, they noticed signs that suggested someone had been there recently. This unexpected clue leads some to speculate that Earhart and Noonan might have actually managed to land their aircraft on this lonely, uninhabited island. If they really did this, they might have lived for some time following what people assumed was a crash. This theory gets stronger with the evidence of recent human presence seen by the Navy pilots. If this idea is right, it suggests that the usual story that they just fell into the sea because they ran out of fuel might not be the whole story. The idea that Earhart and Noonan might have made an emergency landing introduces a range of questions and possibilities. For instance, how did they manage to land on such a remote island? What happened to them after they landed? The signs of someone being there, noticed by the pilots, ignite our imaginations and challenge the simple conclusion of a mere crash at sea. This new angle opens up the story, transforming it from a straightforward disappearance to a tale filled with potential survival, mystery, and unanswered questions. Could it be that the fate of these two aviators is far more complex than we've believed? Digging even deeper into this complex story, there's another group of thinkers who have a different idea. They imagine a situation where Amelia Earhart, noticing that her plane was running out of gas, chose not to keep looking for Howland Island, which seemed impossible to find. Instead, she might have aimed for Gardner Island, known today as Nikumaroro, especially if they found it while the water was low, which could make spotting the island from the sky easier. This choice would offer them a tiny chance to land safely, compared to the dangerous open ocean. Some suggest that Earhart's plane might have ended up in a large body of water within Nikumaroro Island, known as a lagoon. This theory isn't new. It was considered soon after she vanished decades ago. If Earhart and her co-pilot Noonan ended up in this lagoon, they might have been able to get out of the plane and make their way to the shore, surviving there for some time. This survival theory might explain why Navy pilots flying over later spotted signs that people had been staying on an island that was supposed to be empty. However, this leads to a baffling question. If they really did make a crash landing in that lagoon, why wasn't their plane found by the Navy? This story becomes even more complicated when we recall that after Earhart disappeared, thousands reported hearing distress signals over the radio. They believed these signals were Earhart asking for help, and sometimes listeners reported a man's voice, which could have been Noonan. Intriguingly, these supposed distress calls were most often reported during times when the tide at Nikumaroro was low. This detail matters because if the tide was out, the plane might not be fully submerged, possibly allowing the radio equipment to function. Despite the Coast Guard's initial skepticism about these signals being legitimate, the specific timing of these distress calls, coinciding with low tide, has led some to consider that they might indeed have been real, originating from the direction of Nikumaroro. The possibility that Earhart and Noonan could have communicated after crash landing adds another layer to the mystery. If they were sending out signals at specific times, this suggests a level of survival and hope that contrasts with the commonly accepted narrative of a quick and tragic end. The continued transmission of radio messages, timed with the ebb and flow of the sea, paints a picture of two individuals fighting for survival in a remote part of the world. Let's go even deeper into this story. Picture Earhart and Noonan after a difficult crash into the lagoon, ending up on a very remote and empty island. This place was far from civilization, with no people, houses, or stores, and they had very few things to help them survive. Despite these tough conditions, they might have tried to use what was left of the airplane's radio to send out calls for help when the water was low enough for the equipment to work. This situation could help us understand why there were signals heard at certain times and not all the time. Imagine their daily life on this island, searching for food and fresh water, trying to make a shelter from the sun and rain, and continuously hoping to be rescued. They might have used mirrors or other shiny parts of the airplane to signal to planes or ships passing by. They could have left signs or messages written in the sand or on leaves, hoping that someone would find them. Listening to the quiet stories from the past and hints left behind, we try to uncover the real story hidden on a distant, forgotten island. The Forgotten Campsite. Clues to Earhart's fate. Let's delve deeper into what may have occurred to Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan following their potential landing or crash on the island. The theory suggests that they attempted to make a life there, relying on the natural resources available and any supplies they might have had with them. Throughout the decades, explorers of Nikumaroro have stumbled upon intriguing items, remnants of footwear, a case that would have housed a sextant, a navigational instrument used to gauge position by the stars, and various other artifacts possibly linked to them. These discoveries serve as tantalizing hints, though they fall short of conclusively proving Earhart and Noonan's presence. Nevertheless, they fuel speculation and further investigation into the possibility that the island was the backdrop for their final struggle for survival, clinging to the diminishing hope of a rescue that tragically never materialized. The enigma deepens significantly when we travel back to the late 1930s or early 1940s. A British official, Gerald Gallagher, stumbled upon what appeared to be a makeshift campsite, complete with a partially buried human skeleton. This find ignited waves of speculation and excitement, propelling the notion that Nikumaroro might hold the key to unraveling the fate of the legendary aviator. This discovery prompted many to contemplate whether the island could indeed be the last known whereabouts of Earhart. Delving further into this narrative, it's worth considering the psychological and physical challenges Earhart and Noonan might have faced. Isolated on an uninhabited island with limited resources, they would have had to harness their ingenuity and survival skills. They might have attempted to signal for help, collect rainwater for drinking, or even construct rudimentary shelter from the elements. The presence of improvised tools, the evidence of attempts to collect food and water, and the possible distress signals sent out hint at their desperate efforts to stay alive. But the story takes a frustrating turn. A doctor named D.W. Hoodless was brought in to examine the bones. He decided that they were from a short, sturdy man from Europe, not Earhart or Noonan. Then, in a move that now seems almost unbelievable, Dr. Hoodless got rid of the bones, which made it much harder for anyone later trying to solve this long-standing mystery. Let's dive deeper into what all this means. Imagine Earhart and Noonan, far from home, trying to make do with the little they had. They might have used parts of their plane to make tools, collected rainwater to drink, and tried to catch fish or find fruits to eat. They were skilled and smart, but they were also in a very tough situation, far from the world they knew. This part might feel like we've hit a wall, but there's more to the story, so let's keep going. A long time after the confusion with the bones, a group with a long name, the International Group for Historical Aircraft Recovery, or TIGAR for short, decided to look at everything again. They used newer, better science and had more information than before. They looked at the old notes about the bones and thought, hey, these could be from a tall lady, not a short man. And guess what? Amelia Earhart was pretty tall for a woman at that time. So, the head of TIGAR, a man named Rick Gillespie, came up with a spooky thought. There are these really big crabs called coconut crabs living on the island. These crabs are huge, as big as 3 feet across, and they're super strong, strong enough to crack open coconuts. Gillespie thought that maybe these giant crabs had moved some of the bones around or even eaten parts of them. That could be why they didn't find all the bones that were supposed to be there. But it's important to note that this theory, the one suggesting that Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan ran out of fuel, is just one of many possible explanations for their disappearance. The truth is, we don't have concrete, undeniable evidence that confirms exactly what happened to them. However, one undeniable fact remains. Amelia Earhart was on the brink of etching her name into the annals of history with her groundbreaking attempt to circumnavigate the globe. She was less than 7,000 miles away from completing her monumental journey, a significant distance, yet relatively minor compared to the total distance of flying around the entire world. Tragically, those remaining miles became an obstacle for one of the most famous aviators in American history. The vanishing of Amelia Earhart, affectionately known as the Babe of the Sky, along with her skilled navigator, remains one of the most enduring enigmas that continues to captivate and perplex people globally. Her narrative transcends the mere tale of an incomplete journey. It symbolizes the spirit of adventure, the drive to exceed boundaries, and the audacity to embark on ventures that no one else has dared to attempt before. While the final chapter of her last flight may remain unwritten, Earhart's bravery and pioneering spirit still inspire countless individuals to pursue their own lofty aspirations and confront their fears, irrespective of the potential dangers that lie ahead. The legend of Amelia Earhart and Fred Noonan is not solely about their untimely disappearance, but also about the enduring human quest for adventure, discovery, and the relentless pursuit of the unknown. Did Amelia Earhart simply vanish into thin air, or are there pieces of the puzzle still waiting to be discovered? Share your thoughts and theories with us in the comments. Don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe for more.